Well, there's a bilingual challenge to us all. It's now my considerable pleasure to welcome back to Stanford Calixto Mateos Hanel. Calixto is a graduate of the Monterey Institute of Technology and Higher Education, but he's also a graduate of Stanford University. He has a PhD in applied economics from the Food Research Institute here at Stanford. So welcome home, Calixto. It's great to have you back here. Calixto has had more than 25 years of experience at the Banco de Mexico. He's been a professor of economics at his alma mater, Monterey Tech. He's taught courses on macroeconomics, on monetary theory and policy, and financial economics. And since 2019, he has been the managing director of the North American Development Bank. So he's going to get us launched this morning, and or actually by now it's this afternoon. And welcome back, Calixto.
Well, do you hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, it's always a pleasure to be here at the farm, and I cannot be happier to be with this group of people and at this particular moment. I want to thank, as you know, I want to thank first Blast, who was the one that contacted me first, and of course Mark Dugan and the CPR. And David Kennedy and the Bill Lane Center for America West. I'm very happy to see so many friends here and to be with the consul here, Carlos Gonzalez, the consul Alejandra Bologna, and Gerardo Esquivel, who's a long friend, and an even longer friend, Alberto Diaz Calleros, and of course Blas and Senator Benhueso. It's good to see you again and be here in this meeting. I want to talk a little bit. I mean, of course, after this introduction from the ambassadors, I think it was the best to have them and to speak on this because they are actually the two champions. And I must say, in the binational relation, we have two great ambassadors, and that they work together, which is something that's very good for the relationship. It's a tough time in the world, let's say, but let's see, where is the clicker? Here, yes. So they are the champions, and this particular time, I think it's important. I want to just mention. It's going to be said. It's been said by the ambassadors. You have the statistics here that were prepared that are very great, but Mexico has gained a lot of relevance over the last 5 years with economic recovery from COVID and changes in the supply chains and the recent international tensions. That we need to understand that that's favoring Mexico. Nearshoring is happening. It's an attractive option for the U.S.-Mexico. And Mexico is the best location, actually. And there's already a network of binational corridors that is working. I mean, as it was mentioned by the ambassador, the trade with Canada and with Mexico, it's equal or greater than the trade with China. And with all these changes, we're expecting it to be even greater. So that's something to take into consideration. The other thing I want to talk is actually the institution I represent, which is the NADBank. And that was created in 94, with the creation as well of the NAFTA agreement. And it was created to help to solve the environmental issues that were going to be expected to happen as the border developed with the NAFTA. And right now, the bank has evolved as well in its scope, and the USMCA, it's adding bringing more capital to the bank and allowing it to go further in its function. And of course, all these investment growth will impose functions and impose some challenges, which are in its side creating more functions for the bank, and specifically on the environmental part. So I'm going to talk a little bit about What is the links that I'm going to go fast because those have been mentioned on the U.S. economic links. Especially I'm going to concentrate on the role of NatBank and a bit of the future challenges for the border. So as been mentioned, I mean, we have the total U.S. trade in 2021, you know, Mexico was 14.4% of the total U.S. trade of the U.S. Canada was 14.5%, and China was 14.3%. And if we go to Mexico, and I'm concentrating on that, we have 50 border crossings between Mexico and the U.S. And 38.4% of trade crosses through the port of Laredo. So one port has crossings that it's even bigger than the port of Los Angeles. There are 128 million people crossing in 22, for example, and 7 million truck crossings in 22. Just to give you an idea of how intense is the trade and how active is the border and the border crossings. And of course, I know you hear a lot of news and about migration and things and problems. I think we're going to talk about this in this symposium, but there are a lot of things. In the border region, that's what we consider in the bank, 7 million people live on the US side and 19 million people live in the Mexican side. And if you see the population growth of those regions, if it's higher than the average of each country. So there's more people moving to the border in both sides of it. Why NatBank? What is this? What's the North American Development Bank? You might say, well, you know, it was established in '94. There is a clear mandate for it. As I was mentioning, there was a worry what was going to happen with the environment. The bank was created to develop and finance environmental infrastructure along the US-Mexico border. And actually to improve the well-being of the population of the border. It's a binational institution. It's owned equally by the governments of the US and Mexico. It's capitalized equally by both governments. And we are, our headquarters are in San Antonio, Texas, and we have an office in Mexico in Ciudad Juarez. So we are right at the border. And we're an institution who has been proud of having a very good credit rating for international standards and of AA+ and AA1. So there's an interesting feature of the governance of the bank. We're a binational institution. We have in our board the members are the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the administration of the EPA, one U.S. border representative, and one U.S. public representative. U.S. in this case is it's actually Denise Duchenne, who is from Imperial Beach, and she was formerly a senator for California. And the U.S. Border State Representative used to be a senator from the state of Texas. He's now retired, and they're in the definition of a new member. And they're counterparts in Mexico. So this is a binational institution who has in its board and its governance structure the EPA and the Semarnat. And that has been key to define the role of the bank and to define the role of the bank as an environmental bank, as a green bank. Of course, at that moment, in '94, that was not a term, but we are basically that, and all our projects need to be defined in terms of its environmental benefit. If not, they're not approved. Another particularity is that in our board, all the financing that we do has to be approved by the board, even if it's $100,000. That sounds a little complicated, but it also keeps keep us tight in our mandate. You know, this is actually the region that we operate. It's defined as 100 kilometers north of the border. That's 62 miles, 300 kilometers south, 186 miles. And if you keep that, the border it's almost 2,000 miles long. The area we cover, it's a little bit more than half of Mexico's territory. And if you compare it to another country, it's a little bit more like the size of Colombia. You know, so it's kind of an important region as well. And we do specialize in certain types of projects which are for environment. The main priority of the bank is water, and that's very relevant for the border. We do all the water cycle, let's call, from drinking water, wastewater, conservation, stormwater, of course, recycling, treatment plants, all that. We also work a lot with solid waste and all what it has to do, landfills, municipal waste, industrial waste, recycling. Air quality, that's a big thing. And here I want to mention, I mean, when you think about a border, you normally think about a line and some that limits, and especially when we're talking to people in DC or people in Mexico City, the border is where it all ends. When you live in the border is where all starts, actually, because that's where all trade comes, and that's where all the industries get together, and that's where all the products are produced and traded. So it's kind of a different perspective, but in terms of the environment, it's even clearer. The water has no boundaries, so we share the aquifers, we share the water regions, we share the air quality as well. I mean, the air moves, and we have common problems in terms of water and air. So we do a lot of that, and that's the main priority of the bank. And as you know from the news, well, there's a big problem with the drought, and there's a big problem in the border in both sides. The Colorado River is the main supplier of water for Tijuana, so that's a big problem. And actually the treaty we have is that we have two watersheds, and one is the Colorado River and the other one is the Rio Grande River. And actually the water from the Colorado River flows to Mexico, and the water from the Rio Grande River flows to the US. So there is a treaty, one of the oldest treaties in the binational relations. It's the Water Treaty from 1844. And that's where it started, and then we have one more later, and that's the 1944, I guess, again, that's the same. So it's one of the oldest, and that's because that's one of the oldest problems for both countries, water. So the bank is immersed in that. We work a lot with the International Boundary and Water Commission, which is a commission that's from State Department, and there's a counterparty from Mexico, which is SILA, which is the same name but in Spanish. And we work to see what are those problems within the water and how the transboundary flows, and how we can help solve those issues. But as we have grown, and we don't only do water and air, because there's a lot of integration and economic development we have to do, so we get into sustainable energy. We have done a lot of projects in wind and in solar. And actually here it's where it was good, because we started doing wind projects in Texas in the US side. We learned how to finance those projects, and then we moved to Mexico. And actually we funded the first study in Tamaulipas with the Universidad de Tamaulipas that actually measured that there was very good resource of wind in Tamaulipas, and that triggered the development of wind farms in Tamaulipas. And so we have been involved in that. That's where most of our portfolio has grown, actually. But now we're getting into what's more sustainable cities, sustainable development, and getting into sustainable buildings, sustainable industrial parks, urban development, and that's taking us also to, well, how do we help develop and be immersed in this nearshoring, and help get into green manufacturing, and especially getting better processes that are more water and energy efficient in terms of producing, and also producing goods that are helpful for the environment. So that's the two-prong approach. And also, how is the integration of both value chains? And this becomes relevant because, as I was saying, water is scarce. Water is a very important resource, and the most consumption of water, it's done in agriculture. So there's something to be done in that to be able to solve the water problem, and I'll talk a little bit more of that later. The bank, of course, being a bank, we have three main products. Let's say one is loans that we provide as any other bank. As a difference from other financial institutions, multilateral financial institutions, that we are able to lend to the private sector or to the public sector. We're not constrained by one of those. And we're not constrained only to lend to sovereign. We can lend directly to the municipalities and the subnational governments. So that's one thing. And we try to be competitive, and we try to bring the best conditions to our customers, especially the public sector ones. We normally get nice loans for the private sector that provides actually the revenue to operate the bank, and that leaves us some retained earnings that we can use also to provide some grants. And that's the grants we do provide with our retained earnings, but we also have technical assistance, and we also administered some programs for third parties. Especially we have the administration of the Border Environmental Infrastructure Fund from the EPA, who actually provides funds for water and wastewater in the border for actually to solve in problems of transboundary flows. And this is one of the programs that it's most successful, and actually it's very. The bank, in that sense, is a great institution for that, because the EPA could not really give a grant directly to an entity in Mexico, because that would be going against the sovereignty. But they can give a grant to NatBank, which is owned by both governments, and then we can fund and give a sub-grant in the same conditions to the municipalities in Mexico. So that's been a mechanism, and that's been very useful, and that's been a way to really go. And I'll talk a little bit of what we have done in a few minutes. And we also do technical assistance, of course, and because most of the time we need to help communities in either side of the border. And you may not know, but there are communities that require a lot of help in the US side, especially in that area of the 62 miles, which have no running water, which have no sewage, which have no paving, and those communities have very little capacity and in terms of competencies of their. So we do a lot of capacity building. We have actually an institute that trains and helps give basic skills of management for the utilities and the counties. In both sides of the border, and we do, of course, the normal technical assistance for projects and for policy definition. And what do we do? As I was saying, the value that we provide is we provide institutional strengthening. We do public policy support and municipal and sectorial studies to enhance the opportunities of communities. And we do, of course, the financing. We try to do the most affordable conditions for the communities that we're working with. And this is what we've done in the past almost 28 years. We have funded about 3.8 billion in 298 projects, which are representing an investment of $10.9 billion. Most of the projects, as we've done in our history, are priorities in water. Of course, water projects are, in comparison with energy projects, much more smaller. So when you see the dollar amount, of course, the portfolio goes more on sustainable energy, because those are, the ticket of an energy project is about $100 million. The ticket of a water project is about $1-2 million. So that explains a bit, but our focus has been that over the years. If what have happened in terms of impacts, because that's been the most important part. I mean, we cannot fund anything we have not previously defined what's going to be the impact and what's going to be the environmental value of it. So we have done 13 water treatment systems with a combined capacity of 86 million gallons a day, and 251 miles of water lines serving 1.2 million communities. We have worked 40 wastewater treatment systems, and I want to say it's if you see the border in '94, how much water was treated, it was about 50% of the water in the Mexican side. If you see the border in the Mexican side right now, how much of the water is treated, it's actually like 99% of the water. And in most of those projects, we have been involved in getting those water treatment plants. We have 2 water conservation projects or an irrigation district, and though that was very successful, we recovered the irrigation channels, and that created a lot of savings in waters, as it says, 33 million gallons of water per day. 3 stormwater projects, 7 sanitary landfills, and 11 roadway improvement projects. And here you might say, well, why are we doing paving? What has that to do with the environment? Actually, when you have a community who has no just a dirt road, the particulate matter that it's there, it's really a problem. It's a health problem. So when you do the paving, you reduce that completely, and that creates an improvement in the health of the community. So that's projects that we have been involved. Of course, public transportation is really important. Most of the use of fossil fuels is used in transportation of people. If you see the border, there's a lot of old vehicles actually that come from the US, but they remain in the border. We have a program we're trying to change and give incentives to change to newer fleets and more, of course, better technologies in terms of the pollutants, and that's how we work. And of course, the clean energy, we've been in 33 clean energy facilities with a capacity of 2,000 megawatts. That has displaced about 4 million metric tons of CO2 per year by having those and not the combined cycle plants. Going a little bit on the future, what's coming? What do we see? We have, of course, nearshore opportunities will boost economic growth in the border states. And it will be higher than the rest of the country, because that's where the near comes in. You know, the border states are the nearest states to the U.S., and that's one of the lessons coming from this crisis. You want to have production very close. And if we see, you know, in the first quarter of 23, we have seen around 16.4 billion new project investments in Mexico. And especially in the auto industry. If you have heard a bit, Tesla is actually moving a big facility into the area of Monterrey in the state of Nuevo León. And Nuevo León has 64 nearshoring investments in the first quarter, mostly related to the auto industry and related to the investment of Tesla on supply chain distributors of Tesla. And so we see, of course, economic growth will increase the pressure on the environment. Of course, water, we will need more water because we're expecting more population, more industry. So there's a need to have more water. So we need to, of course, it's an arid region. We need to increase the sources of water. That means desalination, reuse, treatment, but totally reuse. And desalination, it's if you don't know, I mean, El Paso has a big desalination plant because the aquifer is salty. So that could be replicated some other places. Tijuana is a big project. It's a big problem because it only has one source of water, which is the Colorado River. So there's also a need to diversify the sources of water. Air, of course, air is a problem. We have a pollution that's coming. Of course, that's where we need to get into more urban and carbon transportation. We're starting to develop projects with some border cities and that's the reason we also get involved in border crossings, because as I was saying, the amount of vehicles crossing is such, and especially the times that are taking, it's such that you can have idle vehicles for hours, and that's a very strong source of point pollution. And actually, the places where the highways cross are the places where not the wealthiest people of the communities live, and actually it's in part an issue of environmental justice to make that more efficient and to reduce the pollution that comes from those vehicles. In terms of clean energy, of course, we are seeing that there's going to be, in order to be developing more industries, you need to have, of course, energy and water, and of course trained people. That's one thing that Ambassador Salazar mentioned, which I think it's also an important part. We cannot get into that, but I think that's an important part of the development of the binational relationship and of the border. That's a topic that also Ambassador Moctezuma has. I heard it more with Ambassador Moctezuma than Ambassador Salazar, but that's the reason I said they work together and they were very well coordinated. So one thing that mentioned one, the other one didn't mention, and that's great that they work that way. In terms of solid waste, of course, more people, more processes, we need to work on that and work more on circular economy type of projects. And of course, urban development, more buildings, more housing, we need to do it in terms that we are using the best lead technology or edge technology, so that we know that we are trying to do the best in terms of environment. And of course, what I mentioned, green manufacturing and green value change. So just to conclude, and it's if you look at Mexico, the border is even more relevant today than it was before. There is a lot of regional and economic integration coming, and that's mentioned in many ways. I mean, the area of San Diego, Tijuana, the area of El Paso, Juarez, the area of Laredo and Nuevo Laredo, and of course Naco and Nogales and all those other smaller towns are always working one side and the other. We need to think a lot about how to make it sustainable in terms of the environment, and we have to do more research in measuring impacts and value chain integration. How is it that clusters are going to be formed? And that's where I think there's a lot of opportunities with the Bill Lane Center and the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research. So the collaboration needed to do some studies on that and work, and I hope we can actually get into that and get for the border. So that's my participation. Thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much for this. I wanted to ask you very specifically about Monterrey and the water problems in Monterrey, in the city of Monterrey. So last summer, as you know, they suffered a terrible drought. But the challenge there is that it's decisions that should have been taken 10 years ago that are affecting the city. So the question is, what can an institution like NatBank do? And also thinking about this last thing you said about the distributional impact. In Monterrey, it was the poorest in Monterrey who were suffering the most of the water shortage. So I wonder if you have some thoughts on how you can make a difference there.
Well, if I can tell you, we were involved in the project that was canceled, that was going to bring water like 6 years ago. And that was a political decision of why it was canceled. There are now options that are being that are explored, which bring the same issue. I mean, there need to be alternative sources of water for Monterrey. I mean, there's no way they can get it all from groundwater. I mean, they need to bring water from far away. And there are ways to do it. There's now talks about doing something through Tamaulipas, bringing water from Tamaulipas to a reservoir in Tamaulipas and then connecting that to Monterrey. That's going to take some time, but we're actually involved in that and trying to work with both governments from Monterrey and Tamaulipas. That Monterrey is where it's on the news, but there's a big issue in any other border town. And that's something that's happening and that will happen if we don't take precautions. We are working in the area of Tijuana, and the governor there is worried and it's working towards it. We actually gave a loan recently for the government of Baja. It was a $150 million loan. And it's actually a very creative way because it's actually, it has a performance fund, that's a performance evaluation of the funds. The state governor is getting that loan, but it's going to lend it to its utility institutes, and they are going to make, of course, it's thematic. It's only for water, so they are going to do water works on treatment plants and desalination plants and distribution lines, and they will have to cover certain performance indicators. If they do get to those performance indicators in terms of how they are operating the plants, they will have they will not all the money they pay for the loan will be given back to them so that they can do some more investments in the same projects. So that's creating incentives, that's creating the way of doing different financing and trying to solve the problem to having the right incentives there. So that's in terms of that. Please.
I was impressed by the broad spectrum of projects that the NAD Bank gets involved with, but I didn't notice anything for healthcare. Forgive my ignorance for asking, but is that fall under the urban development, or is it handled another way?
That's been hard because it was not like directly linked to us. We have actually figured a way through the development of buildings, and there's a project that we're just actually finding the final details and signing of a hospital in San Luis Rio Colorado, which is a complete development of a new facility with all the LEED certification and everything, reduction in the use of energy, reduction in the use of water, and of course that's providing services to the community of migrants and actually from the ones that come to the U.S. and work temporarily on the farms. They have a treaty, an agreement with the insurance companies, so they can treat them. So they come back to Mexico, they get this treatment, and it's all trying to do the healthcare. It's not our main line of work, and we have to, given our specific mandate, we have to get the environmental part as a way to get it. But that's the way we've done it. And of course, there's a lot more need on water issues, but and our board members normally like it more to get into water. I mean, read that EPA seminar. So that takes a little while to get the approval for the board, but we're getting there.
I think I also saw food value chain on the list. Would you mind elaborating, please, on what sorts of projects you work on in the food space and ag space?
Yes, this is a brand new topic that we're coming in, and what we're trying to get is to really figure out where are the in terms of the value chain, there are a lot of processes that involve cold transportation and everything. And that's where we're trying to optimize it and be more energy efficient in that sense and more expedited transport so that there will be less energy required and of course integrate the value chain. But it could go even further to go even when you start producing the product and where it is and how you link all that process. It's a brand new thing. I cannot go further because we haven't got any project related to that, but that's our aim.
First off, thank you. This has been very interesting. I noticed that one of your issue areas was sustainable cities, and that got me thinking about the urban-rural divide that is so stark, at least in the U.S., and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what challenges and opportunities there are in rural communities that are within your jurisdiction.
Well, you're right. It's not a topic that we take as you know, the environmental part is difficult to measure there because the cities start invading what was rural lands, and we need to see how it is planned the city, and in that way we can help not spread the city that all. The new techniques say that we shouldn't spread cities for so long because then you have to add more sewer lines and distribution lines and of course if you grow the city higher then it's better, but then you have to provide a lot of planning on how you do spaces so that people can have recreation facilities so that they can have a good development and you provide enough water, enough energy, etc. for living. So I will leave it there because again it's something that we are starting to get into that topic, but we are aware of all those issues, and that's the reason we need the help of the academics here to get to the point.
Sir, when you talk about funding groundwater pumping for cities like Monterrey, is there a concern that groundwater will be overpumped and will get more saline, and that you'll have to spend more money on energy desalinating it, and that there will come an end point when you lose the groundwater? How do you think about that in economic terms?
No, we actually are seeing that, and that's the problem. Especially in Baja, for example, I know you heard about the Valle de Guadalupe wines and everything. They have a peculiarity, those ones. They're great wines, but they have a little salty taste. And it's because they're getting to the aquifer is getting to the saline water. So yes, that's the concern. That's the reason we say we cannot overexploit those ground sources, and we need these new sources of water. Could be desalination, but it needs to be more the reuse and the treatment of water. So that's where we're trying to do our research and our impact over there.
Well, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking Calixto Mateos for this wonderful introduction.